The pain of losing a young relative never quite goes away, but for one New York family, it's like the death of their loved one just happened. More than 3 years after she was killed, they're fighting for justice, but they're also finding peace through faith. Currents News' Michelle Powers is here with this special report. Michelle.
That's right, Liz. Accidents happen is one of the world's most overused cliches, but one so-called car accident forever changed a family's opinion of the word and the course of their lives. They say car accidents are the only way you can kill someone in New York City and possibly get away with it.
Unbelievably, they have lived all these years.
These aren't ordinary plants.
So every household has a Victoria plant.
They're special to ELSA Nicodemus. They used to belong to her daughter.
She was at her happiest and at the peak of her life.
Victoria Nicodemus, 30 years old, living her dream, a thriving art curator with installations dotting New York City.
This was my favorite piece that we went to see.
And marriage in her future.
I can smell her, I can feel her, and I can touch her when I look at that picture. I feel her life.
This is the last picture of Victoria. She took it on the last day of her life. And now when her family looks at it, they want justice. December 6, 2015, Victoria's bright future was cut short.
She always had this beautiful, fine complexion.
The baby Elsa taught to walk, the one who loved colors and dress up, took the last steps of her life on this Brooklyn sidewalk. She was shopping for Christmas.
This wasn't an accident. This was something that could have been avoided. There were steps all along the way that could have stopped this crash from occurring.
When a Chevy Suburban came onto the sidewalk on Fulton Street, hitting Victoria and her boyfriend. He survived, but Victoria died.
We had a closed coffin. She bled out on the street. It was just devastating. When you bring a life into this world, you don't expect it to leave before you.
And then here, Frankie laughed because she was cheesing pretty hard.
More than 3 years later, the family still struggles with her death, but they found solace through faith.
I pray to God, I talk to him, and I know God's wheels of justice are always turning.
Never again would they consider a car crash an accident.
Accident is kind of a feel-good term that people use to excuse what's often reckless driving or inattentive driving.
Instead, they call Victoria's death and every other car crash that takes a life a homicide. The man behind the wheel of that Chevy, Marlon Sewell, was driving with a suspended license. It was the second time in less than a year that Sewell was caught without one. Not only was the SUV's inspection expired, but the vehicle also failed inspection prior to the crash. According to the NYPD officers on the scene, Sewell told them he felt lightheaded and woozy from car fumes. Sewell also reportedly told police that the month before, the fumes inside his vehicle caused him to pass out before sideswiping a tractor trailer. Now, you may think that drivers like Marlon Sewell will face serious charges, but the reality is, unless drugs and alcohol are involved, that's often not the case.
It is very rare that someone is actually charged for the act of killing someone else with their car.
Mark O'Connor is the Deputy Director of Transportation Alternatives, an organization that works to make New York City streets safer for pedestrians. He says the majority of drivers who kill pedestrians are not charged. Those who are often face misdemeanors, from speeding to careless driving, with minimal penalties. In 2015, district attorneys in New York City brought charges against less than 2% of drivers who did not flee the scene or were not intoxicated during fatal crashes.
Driving is a privilege, it's not a right. You are wielding a multi-ton lethal object. In an instant, you can actually take someone's life, and we haven't fully appreciated that.
But Victoria was killed on the sidewalk, a place most people assume they're safe.
It's not until something like this happens to you or your family, that you have this, really terrible realization as to, how the system really works and, how overwhelmed the system is, the lack of protocol.
Leaving families like the Nicodemuses sitting through trial after trial, year after year. Currents News reached out to the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office to identify the number of crashes it has prosecuted involving a fatality. They did not respond. According to Transportation Alternatives, New York City's DAs do not track or document any cases where people are killed by lawless driving.
So fighting for all this, what would Victoria think about you guys still making this push?
My mom reminds us all the time, we need to be more like Victoria. We need to continue to fight for her. She would do it for us.
Each court conference just as painful as the first. When the case originally went to trial, it ended in a mistrial in September of 2017. Since then, the case has been delayed numerous times.
I just think that it's just a scheme of the defense to just push it off until it's not in people's memories. And I'm not going to let that happen.
Because Victoria is still so alive in theirs.
This is Victoria. It's such a, yeah.
I love that.
Marlon Sewell is still facing a retrial. He'll eventually be tried again on charges of second-degree manslaughter and criminally negligent homicide, among others. If convicted, he could face up to 15 years in prison.
There's really no, punishment that could bring her back or, justify what he did. But I think that, it sends a message that, this type of, actions aren't tolerated. And hopefully it raises some awareness to people that are driving around cars in disrepair, and maybe they think twice themselves where, hey, instead of sitting in jail, maybe I should think about fixing my car.
It's not going to bring my daughter back, but it will somehow contribute to changes that are needed to protect the public.
They hope no other daughter or son, sister or brother exists only in yearbooks, frames, and memories. But instead, they live out the life they loved in color.
God gave human beings free will. The free will to do what this man did, but also the free will to fight for justice, because you're just as guilty if you see an injustice done and don't say or do something about it.
The pain and the fight still continues for the Nicodemuses. On April 1st, the family was informed that the pretrial hearing was delayed for the 10th time. It's been rescheduled for next month. Marlon Sewell is expected to maintain his innocence, Liz.
Michelle, you cannot watch that and not have questions. Now, you mentioned that statistics in regard to lawless driving crashes, they're hard to come by, but you were able to find some.
So the ones that I was able to find was how many people in New York City were killed on the sidewalk. And this had to be compiled because it wasn't readily available. Now remember, the sidewalk is supposed to be the one place that people can assume they're safe, like Victoria probably did. And according to the Department of Transportation, from 2010 to 2017, 59 New Yorkers were killed on the sidewalk, and nationally that number rises to about 500 people.
Wow, those are startling statistics. Thank you so much for that report, Michelle.